Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Motion. Today we're going to be looking at global illumination and how we can use it to light up our scene. The scene you're looking at right now is not using any lights whatsoever. It's lit completely with global illumination and a HDRI image. We're going to go more into what that is and what that means in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay guys, so before we get started on this, I just want to give you a brief introduction into how global illumination works. So I'm just going to create a sphere and I am going to render this out, and you're going to see that our default light in our scene is what's brightening this scene up. Now if I turn on global illumination and if I render that again, you're going to see nothing. So let's create a plane, and I want to set the orientation of this to +Z, and I want to right click on it, go to C4D tags and add a target tag and set our sphere to be the target object by dragging our sphere down into our target object field. Now if I move this around, it's going to point directly at our sphere. So let's just bring that up and down there. Now let's render this again. Again, we're seeing nothing. Now if I create a new material and add it to our plane, render that, nothing again. Now global illumination is going to use this plane object as a light as long as the color is coming from the luminance channel. So luminance isn't actually ticked, so if I turn off reflectance and color, let's turn on luminance, and now let's render this. Now you can see that we're getting a light source from this plane which has luminance turned on. So that's basically what global illumination is doing. It's looking for anything that has luminance and it's using it as a light source. So if I go to my content browser, go into presets, prime, and presets again, go to light setups, HDRI. All of these are basically images of places like parks or photo studios, and they all have bright pixels and dark pixels. So let's just take this one, Cloudy Park, for example. Double click on that. Now let's open that up and see what it looks like. And you can see that it's loaded into the luminance channel. So if we open that up by clicking on edit, now we can see that this image has bright pixels which will act as a bright light, and not so bright pixels which will act as zero light in this very dark area, or not so bright in this green area. So let's add this to our plane and let's see what that does to our sphere. Now it's changed the light all right. So basically you can see that the light is kind of faded, and up at the top where the grass area is, it's a bit dark. Now we can reflect this scene, this image here, if we create a reflective material. Let's add a new material to our sphere and go into the reflectance channel. Let's add a Beckman, and now let's see what that looks like. So now you can see our sphere is reflecting this image, and it only does so because it's in the luminance channel. If I go into our cloudy material here, our Cloudy Park material, if I copy this shader into our color channel and turn off luminance, then there's going to be no result, because global illumination is only going to look at whatever is coming from the luminance channel. So let's undo what we just did there, turn off color, back on with luminance, and let's render that out. Okay, so that's the brief introduction to global illumination. So I'm going to undo everything I just did there. I'm not going to undo everything. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go File, New. We're going to start afresh and create the scene that we saw in the introduction to this video. So to do so, we're going to create a sphere, and we're going to set the radius to about 60 centimeters. We want to create a cloner, and we're going to make the sphere a child of the cloner. And in the cloner, we're going to set the mode to grid array. We don't want our spheres to be touching off each other, so let's increase the size here to about 246 on each the X, Y, and the Z. So now they're all separated, and we can increase the count. So let's do that. Now we don't want this to happen, so undo that and set the mode to per step. This is what we want to happen. So I'm going to set this to 7 by 7 by 7, and actually I'm going to go 6 by 6 by 6. And I want to randomize their positions, so I'm going to make sure that the cloner object's selected, so that the effector we now add is going to affect the selected cloner. We're going to add in a random effector. That's going to randomize the position along the X, Y, and Z 50 by 50, 50 on the X and the Y and the Z, which is fine. And we also want the random effector to affect the scale of our spheres. So turn on scale, tick the uniform scale tick box there and set this to -1. Okay, so they're all kind of looking like glue or goo. They're all glued together. We want them to not be like that. We want them to behave like real spheres in the real world. So to do that, select your cloner, right click, go to simulation tags, and add a rigid body tag. Now if we hit play, you can see that they're actually reacting to gravity, but they're still not reacting to each other. So to make that happen, in your dynamics tab, in your rigid body tag, go to collision and set the individual elements to all. Now hit play there, and you can see that they're going to react to each other now. Cool. Now we don't want them to burst off into infinity. What we want them to do is retain their original position, but also be dynamic. So to do that, select your rigid body tag, go to dynamics, go to force, and set follow position to 5. So that's going to tell them to, be dynamic, but at the same time don't stray too far away from their original position. So now you can see what that is doing for us. I'm going to set my frame range to 600 and hit enter. If you double click here and anywhere on this bar, it'll increase the frame range to the one that's set. So now you can see our balls are moving around slightly, ever so slightly, and that's exactly what we want them to do. So if we reduce this follow position to 0, they're not going to do that. They're going to burst off into infinity. Put that back to 5. Okay, so next we want them to move up and down along the y-axis. So how can we do that? Well, we could animate them to do so, but that would take a lot of time. What we can do is select your cloner object, right click, go to Cinema 4D tags, and then just go down to, where is it? Vibrate. This is a great tag. What we can do is we can enable position, and if we hit play, you'll see that they'll move ever so slightly 100 centimeters along the x-axis. Now we don't want them to move along the x-axis, so hit 0 there, hit tab, and we want them to move along the y-axis, so that's going to be up and down. We can set that to 600 centimeters. And we also want it to be a regular pulse. Right now it's kind of random. We want this to be regular. So it's going to go up and down like that, and we want to reduce the speed, so we're going to set the frequency to about 0.3. Okay, so that's looking better. And what we're going to do now is create a floor object for them to hit. Because right now they don't have anything to land on. So let's create a floor object. And they're passing right through there. So we need to add a collider tag to this floor so they won't pass through anymore. Right click on your floor, go to simulation tags and collider body. Now you can see that our floor is acting like a real floor and it's catching our spheres. I want to bring down our floor just a little bit. No, undo that. We're not going to bring down our floor. We're going to go to our cloner vibrate tag. We're going to increase our amplitude here to about 900. I'm going to go even higher, 1200. Okay, cool. I'm liking that so far. Next, we're going to create the cylinder. Excuse me. We're going to create the cylinder that you saw in the introduction video, and we're going to increase the scale on that to about there. I'm eyeballing it, so it's let's see, we are setting the radius to 350 and the height is set to 140. 1420. Okay, cool. I don't know why that's not working. Okay, and we also want to go to our caps tab and tick fillet so we can get some nice rounded edges. Reduce the radius here to about 30 centimeters. Now, as you can see, our spheres are passing right through our cylinder because our cylinder does not yet have a collider body tag. So we can copy our collider body tag from our floor, or we can just right click on our cylinder and add one like this. So now you can see that our cylinder is acting in the same way as our floor. It's catching our spheres as they land on top of it. So I want to increase the amplitude along the y-axis on our vibrate tab even more. I'm going to go 1400 on that. Yep. And if you look at this, you can see that our spheres are kind of jittery here. So to smoothen out that jitteriness, click on your rigid body tag on your cloner. Go to dynamics, no, collision, and set the bounce to 0. Hit tab, set the friction to 0, and set the collision noise to 0. Now you can see that's way smoother right there. There's no jittery jumping ness. So okay, so that's pretty much it for our animation. So let's pause it here, and now let's turn on global illumination, and let's see what we get. So we get nothing because we have nothing illuminating our scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all select a HDRI image from our content browser, and if you forgot how to get there, you basically go to your content browser, go to presets, go to prime, go to presets again, light setups, and here we are, HDRI. You get a bunch of HDRI images for free with Cinema 4D. Well, it's not free because Cinema 4D is very expensive, but anyway. And then what do we want? We said we're going for Cloudy Park 1. So double click on that and go back to your objects here, and we need something to add this to. So what are we going to add it to? We need a big massive sphere that encapsulates our scene. So to create that, we could just make a big massive sphere like that, or alternatively, delete that, you can create a sky. And that's just basically a big massive sphere that encapsulates our whole scene. And we're going to add the HDRI image to our sky. Now let's render this and see what goes on. So now you can see that our HDRI image is lighting our scene. We need to add some reflectance to our spheres so that's going to reflect our HDRI image. So let's create a new material, and we will add that to our cloner object. And we are going to add a CGX reflection to that, and it is going to be, it's going to have a layer Fresnel, which will be a dielectric. Now let's do a preview of this and see what we got. So what we should have is that our HDR image is going to be reflected by our spheres. So you can see it kind of, there it is, it's going on. Let's create a material for our floor. Call this floor, and this is going to be as white can be. And now let's do another render on that. Okay, so now we want to create some color because our spheres are all white and we don't want that. So create a new material. We're going to call this spheres, and we're going to open that up. We're going to use what's called a variation shader. Click on your color channel, go to this arrow, go down to effects and go to variation. Click into this white square, and if we add this to our cloner object, we can just hover over here, drag it up and hover over to the existing material to override it. And let's turn on our interactive render region, and also for now just turn off global illumination. So now you can see that we're getting a bunch of colors. Variation, that's what the variation shader does. It gives us a whole bunch of colors. Now where is it pulling these colors from? Well, it's pulling them from here, but we don't want these colors. We want this blue. We want a variation of blue and white, only blue and white, and anything in between. So why isn't it giving us this? So one of the reasons is because gradient blend is set to 0. So let's set that to 100. So now it's giving us some blues, but it's also giving us 100% random color. Let's set the random color to 0. Now it's giving us blues and some in-between blues, but a lot of whites. So we want to set the gradient mode from normal to replace, sorry. So now it's giving us exactly what we want. Anything between blue and white, and it's showing us up here exactly what we're getting. So I'm happy enough with that. I want to add some reflectance to this. So go to your reflectance channel, and we're going to add a CGX, and again layer Fresnel, set it to dielectric. Cool, let's crank up the quality there. Okay, nice. Oh, we didn't add our floor material to our, or did we? Did we add our floor material to our floor? Okay, the reason I thought we didn't is because global illumination is turned off. Let's turn that on right now. and you're going to see some beauty before you. Okay, so that's looking really nice straight away. Now, what else do we want to do? So I actually finish Cloudy Park 3. We want to show that messing around with your HDRI images can give you much better results. We want to do a thing I want to do is rotate the camera preset because this is kind of washed out here. Just because it looks nice, and I like the nice looking here. And I also want to turn on setting that to pearl ambient occlusion. Looks pretty cool already. We need to add a material onto our cylinder. Happy enough the exact same material as our floor. We'll do one more render preview. And we want to set up a camera position also. So I'm going to turn off this interactive render region. And I'm going to go for maybe this position here. Let's try that. It's not in the center. I want to center it up a bit more. Okay. So this is what it's looking like. It's looking okay. I mean, we could always mess around with some other HDRI images. Go to your content browser. Let's try Cloudy Park 3. Drag that down and let's go to objects and let's replace that by dragging it up and hovering over there. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. What I do want to do is I want to create a new material for our cylinder because it's kind of blended in too much with our background, with our floor, I should say. So I just created a default material there. So that's looking better already. And also I want to change our variation shader. So go into spheres and I'm going to turn back on interactive render region. Just drag that out. Maybe I'll zoom out a bit so it'll render faster. And while that's rendering, I'm going to go into the color channel, into our variation shader. And if you click on this little arrow here, you can load presets. And here you got a bunch of gradient presets. I'm going to go for, I don't know, maybe this one here. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's looking way better already. Let's zoom in on that and do a quick render preview. Okay, I'm really happy with that, the way it's looking right now. Last thing I want to do before I set this up for render is to turn on anti-aliasing to get rid of these jagged edges. So go into your render settings, anti-aliasing, set this to best. 1:1 is fine, and 2:2. Turn this off and do a render preview there. See what that looks like. Okay, so that's looking pretty damn cool. Let's set this up for render. So first of all, we want to save our file, save as, save this to my desktop, and I'm going to call it spherezify. It's not a word, I just made it up. And I'm going to go to my render settings, set this to 1920 by 1080. And we are going to go to render. I want to render about 400 frames. So set this to all frames. And let's go to our save options here. Set the format to PNG. And let's go to our desktop or wherever you want to save it to. I'm going to create a new folder called Verify sequence. And I'm going to create this in here, call this sequence. And that is it for our render settings. One final thing I want to do is go into our options here, turn down ray depth to 10 and shadow depth to 10. That's going to decrease our render time per frame by just a little bit, I'm guessing. I'm not testing that now, that's just a guess, but it definitely will reduce render time. Save that, and then let's go to click on render to picture view. And that is going to render away frame by frame. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you learned a lot, and I'll see you in the next video. If you guys want to know how to turn your PNG sequence into an actual video, just let me know in the comments below, or alternatively Google it, and I'm sure you'll find the answer. You guys probably know it already. So enjoy your render, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.